All right, so let's keep talking. Let's talk about communication today. When you think about the heart of a leader, um, at the essence, you got to be a great communicator, right? And that's just not something that you do as in a task, but that's who you are, because our heart is to have good communication. Why do we want good communication? Because most of the time, if good communication is involved, it restores relationships, or it keeps relationships from going sour, or misinformation for going out. So communication is vitally important. So if I were to have an illustration, which I tried to grab one but did not, I think about a megaphone when I think about communication, and I want you to get that picture. And when you're thinking about a megaphone, you're probably thinking how most people think about communication, and that's I want to I want to amplify what I'm trying to say. I want to be loud. I want to make sure as many people hear what I'm trying to say. And communication is important to get to the masses. It is important sometimes, to maybe put your voice out there and amplify it. But I actually want you to turn that megaphone around, and instead of the megaphone being here with the mouthpiece out, do you think about the picture of what if we put the large piece of the megaphone close to your ear, and instead we allowed someone to be on the other end? And when I think about you being a leader in our organization, I want you to get that visual, because I think it's just as important to listen as it is to speak, especially when you're leading a large amount of team members. Is you got to have the pulse of your people. You got to understand the way that they feel. So when I think about communication, the word that we often think about is understanding. We want to communicate for understanding. So if I'm sitting down and writing an email, I want to make sure the content is clear, right? So that's understanding. But really, great communication is about mutual understanding. If I sit down and I craft that same email, and instead of me just trying to point a message out or to make sure that I'm heard, I'm sitting there analyzing and thinking about the email from a team member's perspective and thinking, okay, I understand how they may perceive this. So, great communication is about trying to achieve mutual understanding. I love the phrase from the book Seven Habits of Highly Effective People from Stephen Covey. He talks about this concept, this principle: seek first to understand, then be understood. Seek first to understand, and then to be understood. So if you're sitting down and having a conversation and you're communicating with someone, really the goal of that communication, your first goal, should be to try to understand where they're coming from. If there was a disagreement, if there's a wedge, hey, I want to sit down and let's have a conversation today. How did this make you feel? Let me understand your point of view. And then, in light of that, I would also like to be understood as well. But most communication is done where, hey, they've got to understand my side of the story. They got to understand where I was coming from. No, they really don't. A great leader has to position themselves where that's not their heart. Their heart is to truly care about their team and understand, where they're coming from. So a couple things around communication. One of the things that's very important is our posture. You know, I'm sitting down communicating. I'm not sitting over you today having this conversation. I'm not loud, right? My posture is very relational here. Sometimes, obviously, when there's maybe a little bit more serious tone, then that may take on that posture, and you may have to kind of send that message. But we always want to do in a way where there's honor, dignity, and respect when we communicate. We don't bring in words that we shouldn't say. We don't accuse. And then also in the work atmosphere, it's about performance and it's never personal. So if you have to have a communication around discipline, say, hey, I want you to understand this is about performance. It's nothing personal. How do you feel when I'm saying this? Why do you think we're having to go? So you're asking questions so that they understand where this is coming from. Where do you do it? Where do you communicate? Well, I always want you to communicate in private if you have to have a tough conversation. to coach. And I want you always to praise in public. It's valuable to hear someone praising you. It's awesome when you praise people in public so other team members know that's the kind of leader that you are. And it also helps people understand what we're looking for in team members. I love going back to the kitchen at times and going back with a waffle fry container and say, who made these waffle fries? And they're thinking, uh-oh. And I like to say, these are the best waffle fries that I've had all week. And it's communicating honor, dignity, and respect. And I'm praising them in public. If you have to have a tough conversation, have it in private. All right. And then the last one. So, how do we want it? We want honor, dignity, respect. Where do we want it? Private in coaching, public in praise. And when do we want it? I want you to be aware of the proper time to communicate and have conversations. In the middle of lunch hour might not be the best time, obviously. But if there's a wedge in a relationship, you've got to know, hey, now is the time that I've got to communicate. I've got to have a tough conversation, or we've got to communicate some facts that have been missing because you don't want a wedge to grow. So have the courage to stop and communicate. All right, so a couple questions here. How do people feel if they are rebuked in public? What does that elicit? What kind of response? And then second, what are some outcomes of bad communication?